My capstone reflection. In the beginning of this course, I thought that becoming an educator meant simply teaching children. Now I know that to do that, you have to foster good relationships first, use your observations to create differentiated lessons, and establish a collaborative relationship with the parents before you can even begin to teach concepts. Now that I have finished this course, I am most proud of myself for developing my patience and determination to always create an activity that is able to pivot to any child's needs. Before this class, I had already had practice making lesson plans before. However, during this class, I learned how to better use the NC Foundation standards when determining if my lessons meet the DAP standards, developmentally appropriate standards. For my class, I found that actually asking the children what they wanted my next game to look like helped them get excited about participating. I also noticed that while challenging, creating games that could appropriately challenge an advanced rising kindergartner as well as newly 4-year-olds proved to be effective as well. My observations. By observing how the children played and what they spoke about, I was able to deduce what kinds of experiences they'd be interested in participating in. This was especially helpful in the beginning. We were all still getting used to knowing each other. For example, I noticed that the children flocked to the dramatic play center, so I tried to make my activities as immersive as possible and encourage the children to take on roles during my games. During the weeks I was in my class, I was able to take less notes and retain more information on my own so I could be more present with the children. For my practicum, I decided to take sporadic running notes with timestamps and little doodles to help me remember the moment better. I opted for informal assessments more often than formal ones so the children could continue their play while they recalled information and expanded on their knowledge. For example, if I noticed that a child in art was drawing a bee during a week lesson about bees, I would ask them what they knew about bees, why they decided to draw them with or without a stinger, and what role did they think this bee would have in their hive. I would do this while drawing next to the child and immersing myself in their world. Lesson planning. After I got home every day, I recalled the events of the day to myself, and by Wednesday at the latest, would use those notes and memories to come up with an experience for the week. Due to this, my lesson plans heavily relied on my observations as well as the NC Foundation goals. One of my proudest creations was the Rock Shop game, where children use counting, reasoning, and strategic thinking to purchase rocks with a limited amount of coins. This allowed them to work on their language, math, fine motor, and direction following skills all at the same time. I was able to come up with activities such as the Rock Shop game by listening to what my kids had to say about my activities. After each game, I made a point to ask them if they liked it or not and why. I pivot my next ideas in my head accordingly after hearing their feedback. I also individually asked each child what they wanted to work on in the next week and noticed that when I planned with their ideas in mind, they were more interested in playing the games. Lastly, with my class having both newly 4-year-olds and rising kindergartners, I had to create lessons that were friendly to both groups at the same time. Going back to my rock shop game, with my younger kids, instead of purchasing the rocks, we talked about the properties of them, why some of them would cost more than others, and predicting how many they could afford at once with just their coins. Implementation. Because of how my classroom was laid out and with the weather being so hot, I was only able to implement my lessons at a single table. Before I even got out my camera, I explained the game to the kids and showed them the pieces to get them familiar with the idea. I did this mainly because my kids were very restless and constantly moving, and when I tried to record without getting them hooked first, they wouldn't pay attention or would just get up and leave halfway through the game. During my implementations, I was constantly reminding myself about powerful interactions. No matter how much effort I put into planning my activities, some kids are always going to want something that's harder or easier, or may not even be into the original idea at all. Knowing this, I made a point to follow the child's lead during every activity and pivoted as required so I could show them that I cared about what they wanted and that our connections were more important than whatever I had planned. For example, during my butterfly game, I noticed that the game seemed too easy for the kids. Since this was still in the beginning of my course, I wasn't sure on how to change the game because I had made it a very closed-off game rather than open-ended. Later, I noticed that I had accidentally made 2 of them purple, 2 of them blue, and 2 of them pink, and that in other ways they could also be grouped to make the game more interesting. By the end of my time in this class, I had doubled the amount of butterfly and flower matches to 12 and used different patterns and colors as well to keep the children hooked. My reflection. Throughout this course, I had to reflect on many things, including my lesson plans, my videos, my coursework, and even my interactions with the children and my mentor. After all of that work, I can now confidently say that I am immensely better at viewing these events objectively and working on myself as a future teacher. I faced many challenges during my time with my mentor. I had to de-escalate disagreements, calm down meltdowns, work on my lesson plans, mediate activities, and remain composed and professional throughout all of it. I adapted to all of this by continuously taking a step back to look at the incident objectively, taking a deep breath, and going back in with a clear and present mind. My professional identity. My professional identity has developed from being a naive girl who wanted nothing more than to get to work with children in general to someone who understands the nuances of becoming an effective and professional educator. I can see my future clearer after this class. I can see myself as a teacher who constantly gets down on her students' level to communicate with them, fosters positive relationships with families, and takes their input into account when learning about and with their children, and builds immersive and collaborative environments for children to flourish and connect in. I plan to be an advocate for my students and their families in all manners. I will keep my families informed about laws and bills that will affect them, their children, and their children's education. I will advocate for better pay and working conditions for early childhood educators, and most importantly, I will devote myself to helping children reach their full potential before the next grade, regardless of what that requires from me. Looking forward and moving on. Continuing on into my future education, I plan to continue developing my knowledge about teaching and to stay up to date with anything that affects education around me. I plan to always use what I have learned in this class because it has taught me so many invaluable lessons. I have learned how to truly connect with children, how to create open-ended lesson plans, and how to work with my peers to better understand course materials. Being at the end of this course now, I can say that quality education to me is no longer about what school or center receives the highest marks and the best scores. Quality education is about how connections are made, how families get involved, how children's interests get put into lessons, and how students work together to help one another. Good test scores and high ratings can only truly come after all of this is done and done properly. Thank you.